A character that is experiencing domestic abuse, and did being a mum to daughters play into that decision or impact your decision to take on the role?
I didn't look at any one thing in her life because I think she's so much more than this thing that happened to her. And yes, it can change the course of her life, but it doesn't define her. She defines herself. And that to me is really, really beautiful. She's not a victim and she's not a survivor. Well, she may be a victim and she may be a survivor. She's also multitudes.
There's major behind-the-scenes turmoil erupting around Blake Lively's legal strategy. Multiple sources close to the matter confirm her legal team is currently in crisis mode. The urgency stems from rising scrutiny in the media, especially toward her recent targeting of online creators. Media outlets have begun to notice that Lively is actively attempting to rewrite her version of events, downplaying the role Jed Wallace allegedly played in a smear campaign and instead turning the focus onto independent content creators. But there's a massive hitch in her plan. Jed Wallace was dismissed from the case just yesterday. That dismissal has delivered a devastating blow to Lively's legal argument. While her team is publicly framing the dismissal as a technical jurisdiction issue and insisting they're still evaluating legal options to hold Wallace accountable, those close to the courtroom proceedings report a growing sense of unease about whether they'll ever refile a case against him. Despite demanding that all parties travel to her attorney's office for a scheduled deposition, lawyers were flown in from California and Texas. Blake ultimately canceled her deposition. This cancellation followed an emergency court hearing in which the judge provided her an option to file a dummy complaint, essentially a placeholder that would allow Wallace to be added back to the case solely for the deposition. The judge even offered to let her file an amended complaint so Wallace's counsel could legally question her. Lively, however, didn't take that route. She objected to Wallace's legal team being present at her deposition, arguing that since he was no longer a named party, they had no right to question her. But that's not the full picture. Wallace has an active lawsuit against Lively in Texas, an entirely separate case not affiliated with the federal one in New York. Since these cases aren't connected, there's no shared protective order, and no subpoena has yet been issued to depose her in that jurisdiction. Wallace's lawyer, Charles Babcock, stated he merely planned to question Lively for about an hour. But Lively pushed back, unwilling to be questioned by Wallace's side at all. When the judge encouraged her to proceed with the deposition and just re-add Wallace to the case temporarily via a dummy complaint, Wallace's attorney objected. He expressed concerns that Lively might misuse this placeholder complaint to introduce extreme claims, like accusing Wallace of organized crime under RICO laws. In the end, although Lively briefly agreed to go through with the deposition, she reversed her decision shortly after the hearing and canceled it entirely. Legal insiders suggest this panic within her team is not just about Wallace's dismissal, it's about the entire foundation of her lawsuit crumbling. Here's why. In Lively's amended complaint, Wallace was identified as the linchpin of a digital campaign, allegedly hired by Melissa Nathan. According to court records, Lively argued that Wallace mobilized a digital army, possibly based in Hawaii, to use content creators and other entities to spread damaging narratives against her online. She even suggested that videos resurfacing old interviews, like one posted by Norwegian journalist Shady were orchestrated by Wayfair through Wallace's team. Flaw has firmly denied any such connections. The judge pointed out in Wallace's motion to dismiss that Lively cited two different pricing structures Wayfair might have paid for social media manipulation services. These included comprehensive packages with Reddit takedowns, fan engagement, theory seeding, and crisis management, all designed to be completely untraceable. One quote mentioned $175,000 for multi-period coverage. Another suggested $25,000 per month, emphasizing proactive narrative control on social media. Based on this, the court concluded that in Lively's own allegations, Wallace was clearly presented as the manager of the digital smear campaign. The judge even noted on page 9 of the motion that communications between TAG and Wayfair referenced hiring Wallace for these very tactics. Lively claimed that Wallace, through TAG, executed untraceable campaigns across TikTok, Reddit, Instagram, and more, weaponizing content against her. The key point here is that Lively's entire case revolves around the idea that Wallace directed content creators to launch an attack against her, making their efforts appear organic. But if Wallace is no longer part of the case, then there's no identified leader of this so-called digital army. That raises the question, if the person allegedly managing these creators is dismissed, how can Lively now justify dragging content creators into court? Lively's refusal to file a placeholder complaint and undergo deposition raises eyebrows among legal experts. Her actions suggest she may lack the evidence needed to proceed against Wallace. The judge made it clear, any future filing against him must be backed by solid proof that he knowingly caused harm directed at New York. Yet, much of Lively's complaint references incidents that occurred outside of the state. Lively is now seemingly unsure if she can even bring a legitimate lawsuit against Wallace. Her only option would be to tie Wallace to a clear act that harmed her within New York, which appears highly unlikely based on existing evidence. Legal observers believe she chose to avoid being deposed by Wallace's lawyers precisely because her legal standing is so fragile. To further complicate matters, she's now shifting her narrative. Where Wallace was once the central figure of the digital campaign, Lively is now telling opposing legal teams that the smear campaign was orchestrated by Wayfair as a whole, not just Wallace. This pivot allows her to redirect blame and potentially fabricate a broader conspiracy that includes independent journalists and content creators. This strategy is raising alarms. A journalist at Variety recently expressed surprise that Lively and Ryan Reynolds would go to such lengths to suppress online speech. There seems to be no real motive for this approach other than silencing critics. And if they're willing to target small creators, what's stopping them from using the same tactics against larger mainstream outlets? It's worth noting that when Justin Baldoni's lawsuit emerged, though later dismissed, it provided an alternative version of events that contradicted Lively's narrative. And yet, multiple media outlets echoed the same lines, portraying content creators as misogynistic, alt-right conspiracy theorists. Articles in Glamour, The Atlantic, The New York Times, and others failed to recognize that these creators were often reporting on legitimate lawsuits, not engaging in hate. In fact, most of the individuals targeted by Lively subpoenas are women, not associated with alt-right ideology, and simply sharing opinions or reporting facts. The broader media is beginning to notice this, perhaps realizing it's time to reassess the fairness of how Blake and Ryan are using their platform. This situation raises fundamental concerns about free speech and press freedom. If a celebrity couple can use their influence and wealth to intimidate smaller voices into silence, that's a direct threat to democratic values. Criticism, even harsh criticism, isn't defamation. Calling someone a mean girl or criticizing a film promotion isn't a crime. Accountability isn't harassment. Had Blake simply apologized for the way she marketed her film, this controversy might have died out. Instead, she escalated it. And now, by shifting the blame from Wallace to content creators, she's signaling that no one is safe, not even those with no financial backing or massive platforms. Lively refuses to acknowledge that these creators weren't paid, that this backlash was organic, and that her narrative is falling apart. With Wallace out of the picture, her new targets are journalists and creators, accusing them of crimes without evidence. Her attorneys are allegedly telling creators that they are part of a paid smear campaign, which, if untrue, is itself defamatory. With this legal war dragging on, one has to wonder how much money Blake is willing to spend to keep it alive. Is she really protecting herself, or simply trying to crush dissent? Meanwhile, the media is slowly waking up to the reality of who Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds really are. And when powerful people show the public how far they'll go to control a narrative, the public ought to believe them. That's the current situation. The panic within her legal team is evident. The case is in disarray. And yet, Lively refuses to let it go. Stay tuned for more updates on this unraveling saga. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider leaving a super thanks. Every bit helps cover legal costs, especially in cases like this. Thank you all so much.